On a road near the Antioch Church of the Brethren, a 1931 Ford Roadster took 49 bullets. The deputy behind the wheel took 15. Buckshot and .45 caliber both. He was 2 weeks away from walking into a grand jury and naming every man who ran the biggest corruption conspiracy in Virginia history. He never made it. But the man those bullets were really aimed at wasn't in the car. He was sitting behind a prosecutor's desk in Franklin County, and he never spent a night in a cell. His name was Charles Carter Lee, grand-nephew of Robert E. Lee. He'd passed the Virginia bar at 19 and inherited the county prosecutor's office at 22 after his father died behind the same desk. And to understand how a man like that ended up at the center of a federal conspiracy case, start with the number that made it federal. Between 1928 and 1935, prosecutors said this one county stole $5.5 million in whiskey taxes from the government. In today's money, somewhere near 95 million. And the machine that did it charged its customers a monthly fee collected by the county's own lawmen, priced like a phone bill. Franklin County in 1928 was something else entirely. When the Federal Wickersham Commission went looking, it reported that 99 of every 100 people in the county were making illegal whiskey or tied to somebody who did. Locals later argued that figure down, but nobody argued the substance. This wasn't a few stills hidden up in the hollows. It was the economy. It was the thing that paid the mortgage and put shoes on the kids, the cash crop of the whole Blue Ridge foothills. And when an entire county runs on untaxed liquor, the most powerful man alive isn't the one with the biggest still. It's the one who decides whose still gets smashed and whose gets left alone. In Franklin County, the law itself was the racket. Hold on to that sentence, because everything that follows is that sentence proving itself. The system they built was almost boring in how tidy it was, and that's what gets me about it. A distiller who wanted to work in peace paid a monthly fee the locals called the granny fee. It came from the old mountain word for the midwife you paid when a baby was ushered into the world, except here, the baby was the still and the thing being protected was the crime. $10 a month for a small operation, up to $50 for a big one. Pay it, and the raiding officers looked the other way. Skip it, and your equipment got seized and busted apart on the roadside. One distiller said he ran 15 to 20 stills at once and never lost a single one because he paid every month like clockwork. That's not law enforcement. That's a subscription service. And the money didn't vanish into one pocket. It got carved up. The raiding officers took a cut. The sheriff took a cut. The district deputies took a cut. And then there was a share for what the trial would only ever call another fellow at the courthouse. A sheriff pulling $100 a month in official salary could clear $200 or more off the men he was sworn to arrest. Run that math across 7 years countywide, and you get the $5.5 million you heard at the top. Now, who's the fellow at the courthouse? In the government's telling, the organizing hand behind all of it wasn't some backwoods bootlegger. It was Franklin County's own Commonwealth's attorney. It was Carter Lee. He carried the Lee name into every corner of Virginia like a passkey. When the indictment finally came down, it laid out 68 separate acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, and by the count preserved in the Roanoke Times record, 6 of them named Lee directly. The one man whose entire job was to send moonshiners and crooked cops to prison stood accused in the government's own paperwork of being one of the hands that ran them. If you've seen Lawless, you already think you know the villain here. He's the one in the pressed suit and the leather gloves, the perfumed city lawman who parts his hair down the middle and beats the Bondurant brothers bloody for the sport of it. Charlie Rakes. Guy Pearce played him like something that crawled out from under a church, and audiences hated him exactly the way the movie wanted them to. Here's the trick, though. There really was a Charlie Rakes in Franklin County, a local deputy sheriff. The filmmakers borrowed the real deputy's name and built a fictional man around it, turned him into a special agent shipped in from the city, and gave him the disturbed manner and all the rest. And while that invented monster soaked up 2 hours of the audience's anger, the real power behind the conspiracy stayed where it always was, off-screen, behind a desk. And to be clear, the brothers at the center of the movie were real. Forrest, Howard, and Jack Bondurant really ran liquor out of their Franklin County station and really refused to pay the protection the officials demanded. The film's two most famous wounds are real too, though the movie squeezes them into one feud. Forrest really did survive having his throat cut, and in a separate run-in with the law at Magedy Creek Bridge in 1930, two of the brothers were shot and lived to keep running. The movie didn't invent the Bondurants, it invented the man they were fighting and hid the real one. Here's the detail that still doesn't quite make sense. A case like this could never come from inside Franklin County, because every lawman inside it was on the payroll the case would have to investigate. It had to be smuggled in. So in January of 1934, the Treasury sent a man named Colonel Thomas Bailey, a decorated World War I veteran who'd earned the Distinguished Service Cross doing spy work. And Bailey did something clever. He didn't come to arrest the little guys. He came to protect them. He'd shield the small distillers and trade that protection for the names above them, following the money up the ladder instead of raiding the bottom of it. So he moved in. He posed as a small-time liquor buyer, ate meals with bootleggers, sat in the backroom bars, wrote down the names of the rum runners, and quietly studied where each one fit. These were men who'd have killed an obvious federal agent and buried him in a hollow before breakfast. Bailey spent about a year among them, and what he came out with was a report describing a real organization, an enterprise that ran manufacture, transport, sale, and the protection of members across Franklin and the counties around it. That report became the spine of everything that followed. And then the state did the thing states do. It found a witness who could bury Lee, and the witness died before he could open his mouth. That road near the Antioch church. Here's who was in the car. His name was Jeff Richards, a deputy sheriff, and he was the single most dangerous man the government had. Richards was the treasurer of the whole scheme. He'd personally recorded the granny fee payoffs. He knew who paid how much and where every dollar went, which made him the one person alive who could turn 6 overt acts against Carter Lee into 20 years in a federal cell. He'd reportedly warned people that if he ever went down, he would not go down alone. He never got the chance. About 2 weeks before he was due in front of the grand jury, Richards was ordered to transport a prisoner named Jim Smith from Callaway up to the jail in Rocky Mount. His usual partner, a former Prohibition officer named Edgar Beckett, was supposed to ride along and begged off at the last minute, pleading illness. So Richards drove that road alone with a prisoner in the car, and somewhere near the Antioch Church of the Brethren, somebody was waiting. You already know how that drive ended. Now here's where Untouchable turns into something colder on a man who never personally fired a gun. According to one account, the order that put Richards on that road that night, the order to go transport Jim Smith, came from Carter Lee himself. I want to be careful because this is an allegation, and it stayed an allegation. Lee was never convicted of it or anything else. But sit with the shape of it. A prosecutor accused of routing his own bookkeeper straight into a buckshot ambush. Days before that, bookkeeper could stand up and name him. If that's true, it's colder than anything the movie had the nerve to write. Charlie Rakes got to be a monster on screen. The real thing, if the account is right, was a man in a suit signing a transfer order. And here's the whole county in one detail. 2 West Virginia brothers, Hubbard and Paul Dooling, were eventually convicted of killing Richards, and then roughly a decade later, paroled under circumstances historians still dispute. The men who supposedly pulled the triggers didn't even stay caught. Even a murder conviction turned out to be one more thing that could be quietly undone, and the historians who've dug hardest into this case are not convinced the Doolings were the real killers at all. And the man who may have signed that transport order 2 months later, he walked into the federal courthouse in Roanoke and sat down at the defense table. If you're getting anything out of the real history behind these movies, go ahead and subscribe because I've got more of it coming. While the county buried its deputy, that federal courtroom was getting ready to try the men who'd run it. And this was no rubber stamp show trial. The Great Moonshine conspiracy trial opened at the old federal building on April 22nd, 1935, and it turned into a marathon, running about 10 weeks and hearing more than 200 witnesses between the prosecution and the defense. 34 people had been indicted, part of a net that pulled in close to 80 all told. Deputies, merchants, distillers, even a former member of the General Assembly. 23 of them ended up in that courtroom, and one of the 23 was a Commonwealth's attorney with the most famous surname in the South. 10 weeks of testimony. The murdered treasurer's ledger, the granny fees, the split at the courthouse, all of it walked through in open court. On July 1st, 1935, after 3 days locked in a room, the jury came back. 20 defendants, guilty. The deputies who collected, the distillers who paid, the assemblyman who looked away, all of them going to prison. And Carter Lee walked, him and 2 deputy sheriffs, acquitted. The alleged instigator of the whole thing, the man named as the apex of the pyramid, was one of only 3 people in that courtroom to hear the words, "not guilty." The higher you sat in Franklin County, it turned out, the safer you were. Everyone beneath him paid the bill he supposedly wrote. If the story ended there, it'd just be a bitter little lesson about who justice actually protects. It doesn't end there, and the part that even Lee's defenders couldn't fully explain came later, because that verdict was rotten, and 11 years later, a court more or less said so out loud. The suspicion started immediately. Word got around that one juror had refused to convict any of the others unless Lee was acquitted too. Hold the line for the Lee boy or nobody goes down. That's the accusation, and it curdles everything. The man cleared of running a conspiracy to corrupt the justice system may have corrupted the one jury standing between him and prison. And in 1946, the federal government came back and indicted 24 people for tampering with that very jury. 22 of them were convicted. So a court did eventually decide the fix was in. It just decided it a decade too late to touch the one man it was meant for. A case this big should have left a mountain of paper behind. Instead, 3 things vanished. Sometime in the 1950s, the official court files disappeared, the full transcript of the trial disappeared with them, and the file on the 1946 jury tampering case, the one that proved the verdict was bought, vanished too. In a county where a star witness and a murder conviction had already gone away when the right people wanted them gone, I don't think that's coincidence. I think that's a pattern with a name on it. The fullest account of the whole affair only survives because a retired Rocky Mount lawyer named T. Keister Greer spent his last years rebuilding it from the day-by-day dispatches of the Roanoke Times into a book that ran more than 900 pages. The trial itself is a ghost. We only know it through the reporters who happened to write it down before the paperwork learned how to walk. And that brings us back to the movie, because Lawless gets one thing exactly backward, and it's the ending. In the film, the corrupt attorney does have a face. His name is Mason Wardell, the schemer who wants a cut of every bottle in the county. Wardell is the fictionalized Carter Lee, same job, same racket, different name. But watch what the movie does with him. When Prohibition ends, Wardell gets arrested on corruption charges. The film gives its crooked prosecutor the reckoning that makes an audience feel like the world balances out. Reality refused to balance. The real Mason Wardell was a Lee, and the real Lee climbed into his car and drove home while 20 men who'd worked beneath him were led off in chains. He kept practicing law, kept the name, and died in 1958, a free man. That's the ending Hollywood couldn't sell you, so it didn't try. It handed you Charlie Rakes instead, a borrowed name, wearing an invented devil, so you'd have somebody to hate and somebody to see lose. The truth was quieter and a lot worse. The most dangerous man in Franklin County never raised his voice, never got his hands dirty on camera, and never spent a night in a cell. He just sat at his father's desk with his famous name and let the machine run, and when it finally came for everyone, it stopped at his door. If you want more of the real stories these movies rewrote, the ones where the villain kept his name and his freedom, subscribe, and I'll have another one for you soon.